let me start over again. LEAD is a statewide Latino organization that was created in 2014. And exchange ideas on common issues and come up with unified solutions. Basically, bringing Latinos together so that we can develop avenues to better our lives and speak with one voice when we have to speak with one voice, and a powerful voice when we have to do that, so we can change things for the better. LEAD currently has 4 chapters in the state. That's Saginaw, Lansing, Holland, and Grand Rapids, and has begun to create one in Southeast Detroit, and that'll be a great thing. If someone's interested in working with us to create a LEAD chapter in your community, please visit us at lead.org website for further information. Again, that's lead.org. You know, a large part of our mission is to set things in place so that Latinos become part of the power structure that will steer Michigan into a prosperous future. In other words, to be around the table when decisions are made that affect us. You know, our numbers continue to increase drastically. Matter of fact, the median age of Latinos, of the Latino population, is between 18 and 24 years old, a very young population that can play a major role in the destiny of Michigan and the national level in years to come. And LEAD can play a major role to accomplish this. With that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Guillermo Lopez. Mr. Lopez is very involved in the Latino community in Lansing and on the state level. Guillermo will be moderating the conference presentations today. Now at 6 p.m., we're very fortunate to have Congressman Joaquin Castro, who is also the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus on a national level, as our keynote speaker, and the Honorable Lupe Ramos-Montigny from our own state of Michigan will be moderating this portion of the conference. Now, Congressman Castro will be on the Michigan or the LEAD Michigan YouTube channel. So when this portion of the conference ends, you'll have to end the Zoom meeting and start the YouTube channel, which is again, LEAD Michigan YouTube channel. With that, thank you very much, and sorry for the complications here. Hopefully everything goes good after this. And gracias. And Guillermo, you're on.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. Thank you, Ms. Flores, for that introduction and certainly for starting up this conference. My name is Guillermo Lopez, and I'm currently the chair of the LEAD of Greater Lansing chapter. I'm also a school board member who is on the ballot for re-election in November. It is my pleasure to be the moderator for the sessions that we have today. We have 4 sessions. One is Latinos Get Out and Vote. Second one is COVID, or Michigan Latinos Surviving the COVID-19 pandemic. We have the third one is Immigration, Detainees, and DACA. And our fourth one is LEAD Crisis Response System. So we're gonna start with session number 1, and it's Latinos Get Out and Vote. And our speakers are Mr. Pete Vargas, who is an indigenous Chicano organizer from Adrian, Michigan, now residing in Lansing. Mr. Vargas earned his BA degree from, oops, time's up. BA from Eastern Michigan University. His career has included being an organizer for the United Steelworkers of America, the SEIU, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, and currently with the Restaurant Opportunity Centers United. He is the manager of the hashtag Rock My Vote, the massive statewide campaign initiative to engage Black, Indigenous, Latinx, people of color, and low prosperity voters to vote early and safely from home during this pandemic. With less than a month left in the 2020 campaign, ROC's efforts have reached over 280,000 Michigan voters, including Latinx and Indigenous voices. Our co-presenter is Mr. Javier Cervantes, who is the first bilingual communications coordinator for the Grand Rapids Public Schools. the largest public school district in West Michigan. Mr. Cervantes manages district social media outlets and does public media relations. He believes in meeting the people where they are and connecting community to vital resources. Javier is a proud Mexican-American, first-generation college student whose future plans include establishing a nonprofit organization serving underrepresented communities. He currently attends Cornerstone University. So without further ado, I want to invite Mr. Vargas to start this segment. And when your time is up, I will say time's up. And by the way, for those that are in the audience, if you have any questions, please put them on the chat, and then hopefully we can get to several of your questions. And again, we have limited time, so Mr. Vargas, go ahead.
Thank you, Guillermo. Hello, bienvenidos a todos. First of all, I want to thank LLEAD for hosting this fantastic event, an opportunity to lift up Brown voices during this moment and this time. 2020 is such a critical year for all of us, and we need every opportunity to make sure that our voices and our issues are heard. I'm grateful to be able to work for a national worker center called Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, a nonprofit organization that works to raise the quality of life and the quality of policies and laws that affect the 15 million workers across the country, especially when so many of our families, our familia, our raza, and communities are part of that industry. We are also in an election year, and while we continue to be good allies to lift up Black voices and Black lives at this moment, we need our Latinx and Indigenous voices to be heard at the polls. And I'm so excited to share a little bit of what we are trying to do here in Michigan through our Rock My Vote initiative and our efforts to reach low propensity voters and why they should go out and vote. We have a little video that we're going to share right now with you that that'll definitely say it better than I could and more concisely. So Danny, hit it. Danny, we still need some sound on that.
Engage over 100,000 voters in Michigan to get to the polls in 2018. We want to do it again.
Hi, my name is Rachel Litwiller.
My name is Pete Vargas.
My name is Tiffany Akins.
Hello, my name is Shifili Vargas.
My name is Joshua Akins.
I am a server with over 20 years in the restaurant industry.
I'm the organizing director for Rock, Michigan.
I'm a former restaurant worker.
I am a business owner from Justice Pop.
I'm a cook at Lucky's Steakhouse in Oak, Michigan.
In 2018, Michigan voters decided they wanted to vote themselves a raise. Rock, Michigan galvanized over 500,000 voters in Michigan to solidify the opportunity to be able to have it on the ballot and vote themselves both a raise and an end to the sub-minimum wage for restaurant workers in Michigan, as well as earned paid sick time. But we didn't end there. We decided to take the power into our own hands and engage over 100,000 voters in Michigan to get to the polls in 2018. We want to do it again.
One of the things that is so important with this whole election and getting to a place where we can do the work we need to do going forward is, for me personally, as a restaurant employee, is having things like paid sick time. having our unemployment benefits not just be based off of this $3.62 an hour, that you're actually given a livable wage.
There needs to be more opportunities. It shouldn't be so difficult to climb the success ladder, financially speaking. And I would like to see that change for my kids.
We need to recognize that everybody deserves the ability to make a livable wage and take care of their families, because isn't that the point? Like, we're not just working to pay bills, we're working to be able to enjoy our lives.
Restaurant workers are not only essential workers in Michigan and essential to the economy, but they're also essential voters. In 2020, we don't have the option of not voting.
The idea that everybody helps everybody is so important, because if we don't all take care of each other, nobody wins.
If they have a voice and they have concerns, let's do the vote. It's plain and simple.
If you want to get involved, go to rockmyvote.org or just text ROCMIVOTE, Rock My Vote, to 79606, and we'll be there for you.
Rock my vote.
Rock my vote.
Rock My Vote.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. That is just a snippet of so many different moving pieces that's involved with getting our community and getting our raza to the polls. And we really would love you guys to get involved in it. So as you can see, we are busy. We're trying to innovate as many ways as we can to get our communities and our leaders involved in the GOTV efforts all over the state. And as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, we are now over 310,000 of our raza and BIPOC communities that have been reached so far. So we encourage you to get involved, and we look forward to working with you. Again, text ROCMIVOTE to 79606. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Javier. Javier, go ahead and take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Javier Cervantes. Thank you, Pete, for sharing that information. As you all well know, this is election year, and it's a very, very important year for all of us. So I'm going to share my screen here on a couple of reasons why you should get out and vote. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Javier.
So one of the main reasons why you should get out and vote, especially our young population, we have one of the largest young population here in the US, and they account for a very, very large number here. And those votes will and can make a difference. So not voting in this election or in any election, whether that be your local elections or any other elections going on, those votes are crucial. And now more than ever, we need you at those polls, giving people rides, telling people why you should get out there and vote. Why? Because every single vote does count. I've heard people talk here and there saying, you know what, well, my vote's not gonna make a difference. My vote really doesn't matter. And we are here to tell you that your vote does count, your vote does matter, and your voice does matter. Every person does count and will be counted, but it's gonna take all of us hand in hand, social distance, of course, to get out and vote and make a difference in our communities, in our state, in our United States, and everywhere. Connecting with politics early on at an early age, it's always very important to get involved and know what's going on, because it's important to get out there, get involved, get interested. There's a lot of people that are running a lot of local campaigns that you can get involved and you can get your feet wet. There's a lot of grassroots organizations who are working in your own communities, in your own backyard. So that's a great way to get started and to learn a little bit more about the politics and how we can get involved to make a difference. Making an educated vote is also very important. Voting, yes, that's our main goal, to get out and vote. However, before we do that, we want to make sure that we are educating ourselves before we are getting out there. We want to make sure we're researching the proposals, the candidates, attending the town hall meetings. A lot of times there's town hall meetings that are going on in your own city. And it's important that we're there asking those difficult questions directly to the people that will be in power, making those decisions for us. And if we are not there asking those questions and holding them accountable, then who will? Who will hold them accountable? It is our responsibility to hold them accountable and hold each other accountable to get out there and ask those difficult questions that no one else wants to ask. Voting for those who are not able to vote. It's important that you make your voice heard because there's many people here in the US who do not have the right to vote. And by you voting, you are helping them. For example, our DACA recipients. We have many students here in the US who are DACA, and they're unfortunately not able to vote. However, their voice does matter. It does matter. My best friend, for example, is DACA. And when I vote this year, I'll be voting for not only my best friend, but for all the other DACA recipients who are out there as well. So yes, get out there and vote. The census 2020, as you all know, this is a census year. By a raise of hand, who already completed their census? Good, good. For those of you who don't have your cameras on, it's okay. I know you're in there waving in the background. It's important. Fill out that census. And if you didn't fill it out this year, make sure you do, because in the next 10 years, it's going to come again. And we need to make sure that we are doing that census and educating people on what the census is about and how the census will benefit each and every one of us, our communities, our schools, our hospitals, our roads, all of the important things. And we need to make sure that we are being a part of that to make those things happen. Because if not, again, who is going to come and do that for us? So Census 2020, very, very, very important. Using your social platforms to encourage others to vote. There's many social media outlets out there. There's Facebook, there's Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok. So many great social media platforms that are out there that we can use to get the vote out and to educate others on why they should vote, how they should vote, and where they can get educated and get more information. We shouldn't shame one another for not knowing where to vote or how to vote. We should be educating each other and helping each other out. As Latinos and as leaders in the community, it is our responsibility to teach our generations to come on the importance of voting, where you should go, why, who, what, where. All these things are very, very crucial in any election. And making sure that we're also participating in those local elections as well. Those are just as important because those decisions are happening in your own backyard and in your own community. So it's important that we get out there. Last but not least, we can and we will make a difference. This year in the election 2020, there's a lot of things that are going on, a lot of controversial things, a lot of topics going back and forth. But again, if we don't get out there and vote, you lose your right to complain later on. There's many people that I know that are out there that are saying that they're not going to vote this year. And I strongly encourage you and I challenge you, me and Pete challenge you to get out there and vote and to change those people's minds, because those are the votes that will and can make a difference. So I'm going to leave you with this note because I know my time is almost up. Is that correct? Our time is almost up, but I'm going to leave this with you guys. We want to challenge you to get out there, to not only to go vote, but bring others with you to go vote. Give them a ride, give them directions on where to go, educate them, ask them questions, challenge them, get deeper and dive deeper in conversations, because these conversations are important for us to have and important for us to communicate with one another. That way we know what's going on in our city and in our US. There's a lot of things that have been said and done in the past that we don't like and that maybe we don't agree on. But if we don't get out there and vote, that complaining should not be happening. The back and forth on social media that we see should not be happening because you gave up your right and your opportunity to get out there and vote. I'm going to open it up for questions so that me and Steve can answer some questions because I know we have limited time.
Thank you, Pete and Javier. And yes, if anybody has a question, please put it on your chat and we can go ahead and ask the presenters. I do have a follow-up, Pete. So Rock My Vote is you have now close to 300,000, you said 300,000 contacts or folks that you have contacted through that process? Is that
Correct.
what, yeah.
Yes. So what we've been doing is we've been going through voter databases, going through census records, going through every kind of records that we could find to identify and connect with self-identified low propensity voters, which is basically the bottom 30 percentile of likelihood of them voting 1 out of 3 elections, right? So that universe comes out to about 546,000 BIPOC voters or eligible voters in Michigan. And so my goal is to actually have 1.2 million contacts between now and election day, which seems like quite a feat. But the fact that we've already reached 300,000, could you imagine back in the day, 10 years ago, what would it take to reach 300,000 people, right? It would have taken us a couple of years to do that, right? But we've been able to raise a lot of money and do a lot of fundraising and grant writing to be able to hire at least 50. I have 50 organizers right now throughout the state in Grand Rapids, Saginaw, Benton Harbor, Flint, Kalamazoo, Detroit, Southwest Detroit, Lenawee County that are getting paid living wages right now. And especially at a time when there's so little people working or out of work, I feel very blessed to have been able to offer jobs. And those are all Black, Indigenous, and people of color that are doing this work, that are doing the texting, that are learning how to do phone banks, how to organize lit drops. And all of those things are what's happening right now, and even as we speak, and that's how we're going to win.
How's your reach to the Latino population and Latino voters?
It's happening in a lot of different ways. We've been, for the last year, we've been building relationships with organizations that are led by people of color and doing outreach to folks of their constituents, especially like DHDC in Southwest Detroit, and going out to the immigrant communities in west side of Michigan, right? Mm-hmm. And doing specific targeted outreach from phone banking, texting, and lit dropping, as well as social media. We just kicked off, some of you might have seen it already, a little mini campaign called hashtag Dia de los Votos. So if you do a Google and search for Dia de los Votos, oftentimes, we're all celebrating Dia de los Muertos right now, but it falls the day before election day. So why not keep the momentum going and use our cultural competence to get out the vote? So those are all the interesting things. And the other thing that we're doing too is we're not just trying to be transactional. Oftentimes we've all been victim of politicians coming to our community saying, oh, pandering to us and say, we want your vote. And then we never see them again until the next election. Yeah. This is not one of those situations where we're helping organizers teach themselves how to organize.
Pete, there's a question from our viewer. Mm-hmm. It says, what is the most confusing question? I guess it's the most confusing questions that Latinos have expressed to you. I'm kind of paraphrasing. And what questions do you get most? And I guess it goes with my first question about Latino community. So again, what is the most confusing by your Latino community, and what questions do you get the most from them? Or what is their confusion? I mean,
sure. Well, one of the implicit biases that we have is the wrong assumption that our people know how to vote. Okay, mm-hmm. Especially and I say it very, very easily. I mean, very plainly and simple. Is just because we are registered voters and we might have 700,000 opportunities to vote in the state of Michigan doesn't mean that those 700,000 folks know how to vote. Oftentimes, the actual process of voting used to be taught in our schools. It's not taught anymore, right? So we have to teach our folks, and we have to take our egos and shame out of the picture and vote as families, as casas, and literally help each other go, because the laws have changed in Michigan. Everybody can vote from home and safely right now. So we have to pull together to teach each other how to vote. And the young folks need to listen to our elders to get some of that information on how they used to do it. And then some of these younger folks that don't know how to do it, you know, we need to pull them into the process as well. Those are the biggest questions, is where to start on getting their families to vote. And that's how you do it, is teaching each other and going with each other to the polls.
Okay. Question for Javier. Question from one of our viewers says, many young people who have not voted feel insecure. Are there forums for them to attend where ballots are introduced and explained to them? Javier, have you done any of that? Or
Definitely, especially here in Grand Rapids, there are different organizations who are educating our people how to vote. There's one specifically that comes to my mind, it's here in Grand Rapids. I said it's called Link Up. It's a nonprofit organization, and they are helping people to educate them on voting and their local elections as well. And they also do a really cool thing that I like, is that they go to the city commission meetings here in Grand Rapids. They provide dinner for everyone who joins us. They provide some questions and feedback, and they also even provide transportation to and from the city commission meetings. That way they can see, get that experience and know what's going on and ask those difficult questions that, again, that many people don't want to ask. And they have that opportunity. They feed you, they prep you, they take you. So there's many opportunities specifically here in Grand Rapids. And I just encourage you to get out there, and even if there aren't any in their area, I'm sure if you ask around, if you ask your network, hey, what can I learn about this? Or where can I go for that? There's gonna be something out there. And if there's not, I challenge you, and I challenge all of you to make something up. Make something up. You know what, if we don't have it, let's do it. Let's do that, and let's make a difference. If it's not here in Saginaw and Battle Creek and Kalamazoo, hey, let's make our own thing and let's kind of grow it from there, because I'm pretty sure there's other people that are interested that want to make a difference and don't know how, and are waiting for a group to come together to help form some of these things and these initiatives.
Javier, is there a Link Up organization statewide, or is it just in Grand Rapids?
This is in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm speaking solely on Grand Rapids.
Okay.
Hola, yo soy Mario, yo soy de Link Up, yo soy bilingual community liaison. Gracias, Javi.
Hey, Mario.
¿Cómo está, papi? For the shout out. And as Javi mentioned, we do have a pre-city commission dinner coming up this coming Tuesday. It's free to join. We want Latinos to be a part of everything. We encourage you all to please join us and use your voices. And thank you, Javi, for giving us a shout out. And I hope that we can all, in Grand Rapids at the very least, have you all to our pre-city commission dinners, and let's go to the city commission meetings and use our voices for the things that matter to us Latinos, because, you know, they are different than what matters to everybody else. And we need our voices to be heard, right? Okay.
And let me just say that the dinners at these commission meetings, the pre-city commission meetings, are really good. It's not just any cold sack lunch. No, it's a hot, delicious dinner, catered dinner. So check it out.
If anyone has any questions about any of this, please call me at 616-308-3974 or email me at Mario, M-A-R-I-O, at lincrev as in Victor.org.
Thank you, Mario. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Javi.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Mario. Are there any other questions for our speakers? If you you can also ask questions or send them to us, to our LLEAD site, and we will forward them to the speakers. And if you think of something that you need to know based on their presentation. So I want to thank him once again. Mr. Vargas, thank you for being with us today, as well as Javier Cervantes, one of the young people coming up and doing a great job in Grand Rapids. And of course, Rock My Vote continues to rock, right? All right. Gracias. Thank you. Thank you too. Our next session We're going to go, and the next session is called Michigan Latinos Surviving the COVID-19 Pandemic. Our presenters are Ms. Celeste Sanchez-Lloyd, who is a program manager at Strong Beginnings Healthy Start in Grand Rapids, Michigan, supporting the elimination of disparities amongst prenatal African-American and Latina mothers and their families in Kent County. Being able to relate due to her experience as a first-generation Dominican-American, she began to work diligently to eliminate social detriments of health. Ms. Sanchez Lloyd focuses on implementing the use of community health workers and the value they add to the communities of color. She earned her BA degree from Purdue University and her MA from Western Michigan University. She also sits on various boards focused on serving and eliminating racism and disparities amongst the most vulnerable communities. She is a current W.K. Kellogg Leadership Fellow and was recently appointed by Governor Whitmer to the Michigan Coronavirus Task Force on Racial Disparities. Celeste Sanchez Lloyd is a published author and the recipient of several awards and recognition showing leadership. Her co-presenter is Ms. Diana Marin, who is a supervising attorney with the Michigan Immigration Rights Center and is on the Farm Worker and Immigrant Worker Rights team. Diana has been practicing employment law her entire legal career, first as an associate in a firm in New Paltz, New York. I hope I pronounced it right. Handling class and collection actions across the country in a variety of industries. Then at an Urban Justice Center's community development project, supporting New York City worker centers, organizing against wage theft and representing low-wage immigrant workers in employment matters before state and federal courts and administrative agencies. Ms. Marin moved to Michigan in the late 2016, and prior to joining Merck, worked for Farm Worker Legal Services of Michigan, litigating on behalf of migrant and seasonal farm workers in Michigan. In August 2020, Diana was appointed to the Michigan's Food Security Council by Governor Whitmer. So with any further ado, let's start this presentation with Ms. Celeste Sanchez-Lloyd.
Thank you, Guillermo. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited about this topic, and so I hope I can do its due diligence in sharing some information with you. As Guillermo mentioned, my appointment to the Michigan Coronavirus Task Force on Racial Disparities, just a quick kind of overview around what we're doing or what's our task. So we have our group of individuals who have been appointed by the governor, as you heard, to work in an advisory capacity. And so really what that work is looking at study and reviewing data and coming with the best innovation around racial disparities and bringing those to the governor so that we can really truly make effective policy change and hopefully influence. And so we've been able to see in the last 7 months just what kind of work the Racial Disparities Group has been making. Hopefully everyone has been watching very closely that our numbers are some of the best numbers across the nation. Also looking at Governor Whitmer declaring that racism is a public health concern. And so when we look at some of those initiatives and those conversations that are taking place, we take great pride in that work. And so I'm going to put in the chat box, rather than flipping back and forth through screens, you'll see some links there that I really would tell everyone on the call at this time to take a chance when you have some time to look at those websites. So one is the coronavirus website that is specifically geared towards Michigan.gov. The second link talks a little bit more about the task force and also has our minutes and our meeting dates. So our Friday meetings are open to the public and people can provide feedback. And also if there are some questions or concerns regarding coronavirus, we ask that individuals email and provide feedback through that site. It's a great opportunity to lift voices, especially our voices of color, and recognizing where there may be some challenges and some successes. And then the third link I also have there is around social determinants of health, because I am going to be speaking a little bit around that work. In my current kind of work also, when we look at, you know, the pandemic, and we often are talking about COVID-19 as a pandemic, but really during this time, we're facing two pandemics. One is around coronavirus and the other one is around racism. And so as our communities continue to be challenged, right, people are saying, oh, you know, this is happening within the Latino community, the Latinx community right now within coronavirus. But when we really look at systematically, we've been oppressed and we've been dealing with these same issues for decades. Really what has happened is coronavirus has done a good job of really kind of highlighting and exacerbating the whole situation around our needs and our basic needs, right? Our fundamentals to being successful. And so we know that, you know, looking at the social determinants of health, and I'll cover a little bit about social determinants of health, our communities continue to lack resources and services based on certain things as healthcare, right? Access to care, lack of a provider, lack of testing, lack of screening. We saw this in the very beginning stages of coronavirus within our state, that not having access to care. Also asking those intentional questions, right? Do you have a safe place to quarantine? That's a really difficult question for our community when we are a community, right, of fiestas and celebrating, and we tend to live in multi-generational homes. We tend to live in homes with other families. And so when we tell families to quarantine, that was a big challenge. When we also don't ask questions around, do you have a safe place to quarantine? What happens if you aren't able to go to work, right? So when we continue to look at the economic status as a social determinant of health, where are our employees more likely to be? They're more likely to be in those positions that have been deemed, right, as emergency staff, or they're more likely to be in food industry. So our community continue to kind of have to work in these common day-to-day while experiencing the pandemics. And then we look at our community needs, right? So were they more likely to have healthy homes? Were they more likely to have affordable homes? We talk about in our community not being able to, you know, have positions when the virus happened and positions started to get closed down and industries shut down. Our population was more likely to lose their positions along with the African American community. We also know around economics within social determinants of health. Our community is less likely to have livable wage. So we're not talking about, you know, the federal level, we're talking about actual livable wage. Were they able to have that? We saw that there was a huge drop in those numbers, which in return, our families were less likely to have any kind of health insurance if they were employed at the time, or unable to see an actual provider. And so we continue to kind of see these social determinants of health that, once again, it wasn't that these weren't occurring prior to March in Michigan. They just happened to continue to grow, and they were lifted more up into, you know, the forefront. And so we've been working really hard around that work. I can say for Strong Beginnings, the program in which I manage, some of our work has really been around creating safe places for our Latinx families, making sure that they had their basic needs met and their resources. Our population, when we think of economics and social determinants of health, we're not, for a good amount of them, we're not able to access the stimulus checks that were distributed back in the summer. And so that's another, you know, hindrance to our community. So where do we fill in the gaps? And so as community organizations and partnering, making sure that we were able to provide those basic needs and those resources, making sure that we were getting individuals to contact tracing and to be able to have, you know, testing, and making sure that they understood what testing meant. And also safe places, as I mentioned earlier, around quarantining or finding a safe place to from others in order to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Also, when we look at social context, so I think, you know, the presenters before me did such a great job of talking about those social contexts around the census, that individuals need to get out there and do the census. We need to know where our populations lie, especially for the Latino community or the Latinx population, where we're not monolithic. And often individuals are grouped by race and not by actual culture or identity. And so the census does a great job of capturing that, so we can get funds back into our communities where they need to be. And so I think that's one great aspect of And then also the other part was the voting. You heard that. And so we often focus really high on voting at the national level, but it's really these local and state level individuals that make true influence on our day-to-day living, right? And so as we're thinking of our population health, and we're thinking of, you know, the social determinants of health, all these constructs work together. And so I've been really proud of the work that I've been involved with and the work that our program is doing around focusing on making sure that we're meeting our pregnant women and their families to be healthy and also to reach, you know, the next level of where they need to be. I will add to wrap up really quickly, because I know we're short on time, but a call to action. So I'm a really strong component that it's not about just bringing the issues or the concerns and the wins, but where's our call to action? And so I hope that as you guys all sit on this call and as you continue to research and get involved, that you also implement some of these call to action steps, which is continue to implement policy change that has a health in all policies approach. And what I mean by that is as you're looking at policies, either it be by transportation, around housing, around access to food, that you're instilling some form of health initiative into it, looking at that all those components do affect health. And either that be physical, mental, social, economic, you know, related all back to that. Do some collaborative work, right? Reduce this idea of silos. We don't need to work in silos in order to build our communities. Our collaboration together can make our communities stronger and healthier. We've seen that our community has been very resilient, has partnered and been able to create some really great structures. Diana's going to mention some really good community collaboratives that have helped along with that work. And then increase our narratives to be included into data so that we can get a true representation of the Latinx population. And so with my background being health equity and the work around health disparities, I think that's one of the biggest gaps that we see is that often our voice is not lifted and we don't often have the opportunity to share our narratives. Our stories are often told by others. And so as we're looking at data collection, making sure that we're also bringing true qualitative data alongside that quantitative data, which is uplifting voices and making sure that the stories are matching what we intend. So I am more than happy to put my email address in the chat box. And if there's any future questions or any further questions outside of today's meeting, please feel free to email me and I'm more than happy to help. And I will turn it over to Diana.
Okay, well, thank you, Celeste. I am going to share my screen. I have a quick little PowerPoint to get through that's going to pick up on a lot of what Celeste just was talking about. And really the focus of my presentation today is going to be on how those social determinants of health that Celeste was just talking about, many of those lead us back to workplace and employment rights, which is the area of expertise that I've been focusing on in my legal career. So let me just share my screen. Okay. All right. So I'm Diana Marin, supervising attorney with the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. And as Celeste was just saying, these social determinants of health, they go back to workplace health and safety concerns, right? Everything, as Celeste was mentioning, Latino and Latina workers, Latinx workers in the state of Michigan and across the country are employed in essential critical infrastructure industries. And those industries have continued to be open for in-person work throughout the pandemic. So even when Governor Whitmer issued her first executive order to stay home on March 23rd, 2020, a lot of our Latinx workers were not covered by that executive order. And in fact, they had to continue working in person, exposing them to higher risk of contracting coronavirus and bringing it home and into our Latino and Latina communities. On the flip side, as Celeste was saying, you know, they also, even after actually the stay-at-home order was issued. We know that Latinx workers work in industries that even if they're not deemed critical infrastructure industry, they require in-person work. And this is industries like construction, childcare, domestic work in hospitals, and doing work that you cannot do virtually. On the other side of things, I realize now I'm not even flipping my screen. Okay, there we go. And on the other side is the fact that also Latino workers and Latinx workers are disproportionately being also disproportionately work in industries hit hardest by the pandemic. So these are industries where they're not actually, even after the stay-at-home order was lifted, they are not hiring everyone back, or they may shut down completely. So here we have some more recent statistics from the Economic Policy Institute that show how Latina workers in particular, compared to white workers, are suffering high rates of unemployment. And we know that this is especially concerning because the unemployment insurance system has been completely overburdened during this pandemic. In my office with Farm Worker Legal Services, we have been taking calls from workers throughout Michigan, particularly immigrant workers, Latino and Latina workers who applied for unemployment insurance when they were laid off in April, and it was in March, and then it was May, June, and they still hadn't received any benefits. And we know that this was something that obviously was affecting a lot of individuals in Michigan, and it obviously leads to those social determinants of health and the issues with health, with the levels of stress compounding already health disparities among our Latinx community. So just because my area of expertise is also employment and employment rights among food workers, particularly farm workers, I could not help but add a slide here about our food workers in Michigan. And Latinx workers are represented all across the food supply chain. So in the production, we've got workers who are men, women, and children that are harvesting and picking and processing the crops here in Michigan. And we also have our Latinx community represented in meat processing industry, in egg processing plants, and also in distribution, right? We need to move all those agricultural commodities somehow, and they're being done by workers. These are not automated jobs. And then of course, when you get the produce in the retail, and there we have also a good portion of Latino and Latina workers. And then of course, now as we're opening up and we're seeing restaurants opening up and bars, and back of the house, we've got cooks and everyone working to ensure that the service industry is up and running. So just a little bit more on demographics of food chain workers, who is working along the food supply chain. And you'll see here that Latinos make up about 23% of food supply chain workers. So that's a pretty significant percentage. And here in Michigan alone, we have about 90,000 migrant and seasonal farm workers throughout the state of Michigan that are working on that production end of the food supply chain. So again, these are workers that are doing in-person work, that are more exposed to the virus and are being hit hardest by the pandemic. And we know COVID-19 in Michigan has gotten so much better. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the victories we've been able to have achieve even during this pandemic. But we also know that it's created a lot of outbreaks throughout, especially across the food supply chain. Outbreaks in the asparagus harvest in April and June, migrant farm worker camps. And when we started seeing the restaurants reopening, we saw some outbreaks in that area. So this is an issue that obviously has been affecting our community with some very terrible results. Another thing to note that Celeste, just picking up on something Celeste talked about, paid sick leave is so important during the coronavirus. The ability for a worker to not worry about taking time off from work because in order to seek care or to take care of their loved ones who might have the coronavirus or are trying to get tested is extremely, extremely important, not just as a matter of employment rights, but also now we see the direct connection to public health, this being a public health issue. And unfortunately, this, studies have shown that Latinx workers are actually less likely to have paid sick days than white workers. And that is a major issue and another thing that compounds how the coronavirus and the pandemic is affecting our Latino and Latina communities. And some of you might be wondering, what does unionization have to do with paid sick leave? Well, again, the Economic Policy Institute put out that unionized workers are more likely to have paid sick days and health insurance on the job. And when we're thinking about the social determinants of health and what we can do, as Celeste said, in order to actually improve health outcomes for our Latinx community, well, paid sick leave, paid sick time is one of them. Access to healthcare is one of them. And one way to get that outside of our public health system, right, is through work, through employers providing these much needed social net benefits. And then of course, we can't forget about our undocumented Latinx community. You know, obviously the majority of Latinos are native born. And here is something again from the Economic Policy Institute. Nationally, 66% of Latinos are born in the US. And then about 19% are born outside of the US. And then we have a smaller percentage, but still a sizable number of individuals, 8.1 million, who are undocumented and don't have immigration status, which means they don't have work authorization. In a lot of states, including in Michigan, they aren't able to get basic things like a driver's license. And so this is a community, part of our community that we always have to keep in mind, and we know have been hit hardest by the coronavirus, including in Michigan. They do not have access to the unemployment insurance network. They don't have access system. They don't have access to any of the federal relief benefits that were issued back in April. For example, they didn't get the stimulus check, that $1,200 that a lot of folks in our community needed in order to pay the bills, right? So we always need to make sure that we're taking into account the needs of this especially vulnerable population within our community. And so now that I've depressed everyone on how terrible things have been, I want to lift us up a little bit because there have been some amazing things happening right here in Michigan. I mean, our community is strong and is resilient and has really pulled together to do some incredible work in Michigan. I just wanted to highlight some things from some organizations that I'm connected with or that I follow and I know and that we work with at Merck. And so here, Cosecha is doing amazing work across the state, organizing our immigrant Latino communities. And one thing that they've done recently is in Ann Arbor, the Cosecha Ypsilanti Ann Arbor branch put together a learning center for children of undocumented workers in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, who had to go out and work, right? That don't have access to unemployment insurance, don't have access to any of these federal benefits or state benefits. And so they have to go out and work, and their children need a safe place where they could actually do their schooling, their virtual schooling. And so that's been an amazing project that has come out through grassroots community immigrant organizing. And then of course, there are all these funds that have come up that have been incredible. The Mi Gente Fund, which has so many advocates, including people that have sponsored this conference, right? The Latinx Health Fair by the Hispanic Center of West Michigan. This is a week of action, COVID-19, which I'm pretty sure was by ROC, or I'm sorry if I don't see the, but yeah, there's just been really, really amazing work being done across Michigan. And just to highlight some more, the COVID 313 town halls that were being done, I think like every other week or week by a coalition of not just Latino organizations, but ABIZA and Access and other organizations in the Detroit area. And so really seeing that, as Celeste was saying, that cross collaboration and the power of that has been just incredible during this time. And just again, One Michigan has been doing some incredible work also about emergency funds, especially for our undocumented immigrant communities. And then even UFW Foundation has now been distributing masks in Michigan. There have been incredible rallying around PPE, personal protective equipment. Southeast Migrant Resource Council and all the migrant resource councils throughout the state who have been gathering PPE to give out to our migrant and seasonal agricultural workers. So there is so much right now to be thankful for and to celebrate about how our community has come together. And lastly, organizing. You know, Pete and Javier did an excellent job about talking about what they're doing in terms of getting out the vote, but there's so many other issues, right? And even during this pandemic, we have seen We the People doing youth storytelling, Rock, not just talking about voting, but canceling rent, right? And the issues, all the economic issues that are so important to our community. Cosecha, again, licenses, driver's license campaign. Action of Greater Lansing. I know Oscar's going to talk later about what they've been doing, but always out there focusing on our immigrant communities. And of course, One Michigan out there just really trying to get more DACA benefits for everyone and making sure that we're not forgetting about all the immigration policy and work that still needs to be done. And then again, representation matters, right? Voting matters because who is elected and who is implementing policy is so key. And I have to say that I've been very honored to do some work with some of our Latino leaders that are in government right now. And it really does make a difference. And also not just within government, but even at our community partners and organizations. And these are just some 3 examples here. One is this chart on state farm worker protections. And what it shows is a comparison of the states and how what protections they have mandated so that employers provide to farm workers. And we see here that Michigan has really become a leader among states in the protections that they've afforded to farm workers during the pandemic. And I think that this is really a product of all the work that is being done at the Department of Health and Human Services and all the Latino leaders that are within that department, at the Hispanic Latino Commission, at the Michigan Civil Rights Commission and MDCR, Michigan Department of Civil Rights. So, and we've also been able to harness, you know, all the work that these community organizations are doing to also fight back against some terrible litigation that was filed against the state of Michigan for their work around COVID-19 testing and farm workers. We also did a lot of work with our community partners around ESO Medicaid coverage for COVID-19, and that was a huge victory to be able to finally get, okay, Director Gordon, to issue clarification that ESO Medicaid applied for in COVID-19. And so again, just to reiterate, you know, there is still a lot of work to be done. And like Celeste said, there is a need for a call to action. And as Celeste was saying, we need visibility. We need to make sure our Latinx community is at, their stories is at the forefront, front and center to any policy discussions that affect them. We need access to social safety net. We need the right to organize. Many people don't know that farm workers in Michigan and across the state don't have the right to organize. We need a living wage, a sustainable wage, and we need paid sick time for all. So thank you very much. I'm more than happy to answer any questions people have.
Thank you, Diana and Celeste. Thank you very much for the presentations. Diana, you know, you mentioned driver's license, and obviously, you know, some folks are not able to have driver's license, but has that lack of driver's license impeded them to get the health support they need because of this COVID pandemic that we now have?
So driver's license is and access to it just creates issues on so many different levels. If you think about Michigan, the lack of transportation, that affects whether you can go to the hospital, whether you can go to work, can you make it to your clinic, depending on people for rides. It's just not sustainable when you're having a medical emergency or when you just need to take your kid to urgent care because they fell down and hit their head. So it can certainly, I think it certainly does have a linkage to health and health issues. And I'm sure Celeste could speak more to that. Those are just some things that came to the top of my head, but the access to driver's license is so important. And there's also a level of stress that people feel, right? I've had clients who have been pulled over and all of a sudden now they're worrying about, is there going to be immigration consequences to this traffic stop? And so there's a lot of connections and a lot of link to health and driver's license.
Celeste, do you have anything to add to that?
I think she's got to be unmuted.
Danny, unmute her, Danny. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And got to make a correction. We'll only take questions in the chat, not after the conference on our website, okay?
Yeah, so just to add, thank you. The driver's license for all, yeah, that puts a huge obstacle and barrier for a lot of families, right? We talk about social distancing. And so when we have, to Diana's point, when we have to ask for rides, when we have to ask for transportation issues. Also, we saw that in the rural communities where access to care is very limited and often have to drive out because there are no bus lines or there are no stops. Lyft and Uber are not accessible within their homes, right? So yeah, driver's license for all is a huge component of access to care. And I would say also, when you think of rural communities, it's really considered a basic need for a lot of communities. So we often think of food, housing, water, but for some of those rural individuals, transportation is considered a basic need because they're unable to access. We have stories from individuals where they live up north and they have to come down to Grand Rapids for care and having to, we're fortunate enough in our program that we do have some funding for taxi vouchers and for situations like Uber, but where there are agencies who have not put those as line items and are unable to provide that resource, it makes it really difficult for individuals to get care. Also thinking of when you have to pay for an ambulance to come and pick you up. The cost of ambulance is very expensive. And when we talk about individuals who don't have a steady employment, don't have livable employment, are working 3 to 4 jobs just to make full-time hours on a weekly basis, it makes it very challenging and difficult to have that access to care. And it's, it's almost like a domino effect, right? So when you're not feeling well physically and mentally, and I say mentally because also we've seen an increase in mental health and substance use amongst African American and Latino indigenous communities. And the increase has to do with, we don't have representation in those organizations or in those areas either, of people who look like them, who are able to really talk to them with cultural backing and ethnicity backing, right? So practices that have been historically created for the dominant culture and not for communities of color. And so we say, well, go see this therapist or call this mental health specialist or this substance use specialist, but they don't look like us, they don't speak like us, and they don't share our same living experiences. It makes it very hard to continue receiving those services. And so people then find other ways to heal themselves. And so we saw that also.
Thank you to both of you. Our time is up. But if you have any question for them, please put it in the chat. And I encourage Diana and Celeste to look at the chat box for any questions that somebody may have, and you can answer them directly, okay? So thanks again, ladies. Appreciate your presentations, and they were very informative, and look forward to seeing you again. So now we go to our third session. This session is immigrant detainees and DACA. Our presenters are Dr. Oscar Castañeda, a Guatemalan immigrant, is a community organizer with the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. Dr. Castañeda is based in Lansing. He has been involved in Lansing and around the state organizing communities focused on immigrant rights for more than 5 years. Dr. Castañeda personally experienced multiple challenges with the U.S. immigration system. As a result, he formally trained on immigration subjects and has used his expertise to lead actions related to DACA, detention prisons, and immigrant rights. His co-presenter for this session is Dr. Felipe Lopez Sustaita. He is Executive Director of the Hispanic Latino Commission of Michigan. Dr. Lopez Sustaita earned his BA in Criminal Justice and MSW from Michigan State University, and his doctorate in education with a specialization in community college leadership from Ferris State University. He's passionate about higher education, as he knows that higher education is a pathway out of poverty. Along with his family, he was a migrant farm worker in Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, and Michigan until starting his college career in 2001. He continues to work in the fields as a farm worker a few times a year to show his 4 sons the value of hard work and to keep him grounded. Dr. Lopez Taita is a current WK Kellogg Leadership Fellow. So I'm going to call on Dr. Castañeda to start with this presentation, with this session. And so you have the floor, Doctor.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you for having us. I don't see my partner in the screen, but I assume he's somewhere in there. Oh, there he is. Hey, Felipe. Okay. As Guillermo said, we will talk about immigrant matters. 2 main topics. One is immigrants and detention centers in Michigan, and the other one is DACA and DACA recipients. I will take the first piece, and then I'm gonna pass it to Felipe. And hopefully we stay on time. Let me try to share my screen. All right, I think that we are on business. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. So, immigration detainees in Michigan. I'm still getting used to. Some of you might be surprised because you typically associate my name with Action with Greater Lansing, and I just moved to the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. Very happy in my new position and excited about doing things. We will talk about today. We will talk about 2 very different concepts. One is ICE detention centers, and the other one is prisons. And this is something that, you know, and please, if you find something different, let me know. I haven't found history in the United States of prisons designed exclusively for immigrants. But this is the case of what is happening in Michigan, and I think it's a very serious problem. And we will talk about the connotations and complications that the idea brings. So first, what is the difference in between ICE detention centers and non-US citizen prisons? The ICE detention centers are the typical case, the typical scenario when you hear when they say, se lo llevó la migra, se lo llevó ICE, is what they say ahora. So, you went through multiple types of scenarios in immigration and the government decided that you have to leave. So ICE will place you in a detention center while you get processed. And there's a lot of details to it. I'm not gonna get into it, but the point is an ICE detention center is a place where you are taken when you are in the process of being deported. And the difference with the non-US citizen prisons is that those are prisons that they use to incarcerate people who commit federal crimes and will be deported as soon as they finish their time. There has been historically, there have been 3 ICE detention centers in Michigan. One is in close to Detroit. The other one is in Battle Creek. The other one is in St. Clair. The 3 of them are county jails. And the way this works is those county jails rent a space to ICE. And typically it's a county jail where half of the inmates are your typical county jail inmate, and the other half are immigrants. So there are multiple scenarios, and some of them they are mingling together, and some of them they have physical space separated. But this has been the history in Lansing in Michigan for a long time. Now with the new administration, seems to be a consistent effort in building more detention centers in Michigan. They've been trying hard to make it happen, and we are very proud to report that we've been fighting them. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we didn't. And when I was in Action of Lansing, we started to work with some other groups of people, and we ended up creating this entity called No Detention Centers in Michigan. And No Detention Centers in Michigan is an amalgam of different groups. There is a large number of community organizers, community leaders who are not Latinos, not even immigrants, but they are really concerned about these places. And there is a very close relationship and similarity in the issues that you face with these centers and mass incarceration. That's the same idea. So a lot of these people, has been a lot of synergy with those groups. So let's talk about the detention centers. There is a company called Immigration Centers of America. It's a very successful company, but it's not one of the big monsters in the United States. They have a facility in Ohio, and the record is terrible, terrible, terrible. I challenge you just to go to Google and search Farmville Immigration Detention Center. They have an incredible amount of COVID-19 cases. They have issues with labor. They have issues with the health department. They have all kinds of problems. They have them. This company, Immigration Centers of America, has been for the last 3 years trying to build an ICE detention center in Michigan, and particularly in Ionia. Why in Ionia? Because they need to be close to the airport. This is part of the requirements for the ICE detention centers. When they came to Ionia the first time, they were trying to buy from the state government a piece of property that was part of the. Probably most of you are familiar with the prison in Ionia. So they have some piece of property that they don't use anymore. So Immigration Centers of America wanted to come buy this property and start to rent the space to ICE. That's when we came together as an organization with No Detention Centers in Michigan, and with the help of the governor, we were able to stop them. And then we were happy, and we decided to celebrate. But in less than 1 month, they came with another project and another place where they want to have it. So in the map, in this map that you're looking at the screen, you will see the arrow in the upper part. This is the area where the prison is today, and this is the place where they want to have they wanted to use. It didn't work. The state government said no. Now they are trying to buy a piece of private land. And the problem with it is just, I don't know how familiar you are with Ionia. I am very familiar now because we've been there multiple times. When you take M66 and you're going north, trying to get into Ionia, there is a big Menard. There's a very commercial area before you get into town, coming from 96. And there is a big Menards. Behind the Menards, there is a sizable piece of land. And this is what they're trying to buy. And they want to buy the land and build the detention center from the ground up. It's a huge investment. And you can think that if they're willing to take this investment and going through all the fighting, is because they know that they're going to make tons of money in this center. And we have been fighting them all the way. We've been to many county commissioners meetings. We've been to city council meetings. We've been visiting with politicians in the place. We spent weekends in Ionia passing flyers, sharing yard signs, talking to to religious communities, and we're still in the fight. And let's see where we are, and hopefully we can come to this conference next year and talk about some success in this level. So this is a big problem, and as I said, Immigration Centers of America is not that big of a company in this field. But then I want to move to our next fight. With the other one that we're having is a prison. This prison is called the North Lake Correctional. And I was talking with a friend. I've been in Michigan only for 25 years. A friend of mine who's a Michigander, a lifetime Michigander, was telling me that in this place, many years ago, they had a prison for youth, and they used to call it the punk prison or the punk jail or something like this. An awful name, but he told me that everybody knew about it. In this place, one of the 800-pound gorillas of the private prison business, which is Geo Group, came and acquired that property, and they opened a prison in there, and we were not able to stop it. And I wish I could give you a glorious story and of success and saying that we were able to stop them. We were not, and we are in the fight, and we are trying really hard to do what we can to make them close and to make their life difficult. Geo Group, and this is the point that I want to make in here. It's really important. This is the stock for Geo Group, and you can see how they were going down, how just before the elections in 2000 and the current administration, their stocks were so low. And as soon as the new administration came, look at the curve and look at how much money they made. These are public records, and everybody, you can actually find them really easily. They donated, according with public records, they donated up to $1.7 million to the current administration. Geo Group has a contract for 10 years for this place for $35 million a year. And they are housing about 800 immigrants. And it's another place with a horrible record. A few days ago, they had 93 confirmed cases of inmates and staff with COVID, and they all are mixed together. They don't have separate spaces. They don't have medication. Half of the population in that place are Spanish speakers, and they have no Spanish speaking staff. And I really need you to pay attention to this. When I learned it, I was very shocked. And when I tell in public forums about the situation, most people doesn't get it, and they think that I'm saying something wrong. We start to have communications with the inmates, and some other people took about half of the inmates are Spanish speakers, and about the other half are a whole mix of African, Middle Eastern, Asian, Southeast Asian immigrants. So I took the phone calls with the Spanish speakers, and the next thing I knew, I was talking to their wives and their sisters and their moms. So one day I'm talking to this woman she was a Colombian woman, and we were talking about her husband's situation, who is doing time. And then I said, "Where do you live?" And she said, "Well, I live in Bogota." And I'm like, "Oh, wait, you live in Bogota? So you left the United States?" And she said, "No, I never been in the United States." And I said, "So your husband was in the US?" And she said, "No, my husband was not in the US. My husband was caught by the American government in between Costa Rica and Colombia." And I was like, "Are you saying that your husband never set foot in the United States before coming to do time in the United States?" And she said, "Yes, that is right." He was caught in between Costa Rica and Colombia doing some small time drug dealing. And yes, we have to recognize, we have to accept he was doing some small time drug dealing. But I want you to think about how much makes sense to get a small time drug dealer who just was driving the boat in between the two ports, take them all the way from Costa Rica and Colombia to Baldwin, Michigan to do time. Does it make financial sense? Does it make logistical sense? Does it make human sense? I believe, and this is only me, I believe that it's just because they had to fill quotas, because they have to have the house full, because they make money based on how many people is inside there. And after I learned this, I start to ask questions with all those families, and they have Colombians, Peruvians, Ecuadorians, Guatemalans doing time who never came to the United States until they were caught by the American forces.
Time, Oscar.
Yes. So this is a terrible story, and there's so much more to say about this. And I hope that you guys come too close to No Detention Centers Michigan and you listen to all those horrible things. And I'm gonna pass it to Felipe. And Felipe, sorry if I took your time.
Okay, Felipe. Unmute.
Okay, I just got access. Muchísimas gracias, Oscar, por todo el trabajo. Es algo muy importante para nuestra comunidad, que haya personas como tú que no tienen miedo de pelear. Algo que es muy importante porque lo que estás diciendo no lo vamos a mirar en las noticias ni nada. So, muchísimas gracias. También, Guillermo, gracias a todo el comité de LEAD por todo lo que hacen. Yo sé que muchos de ustedes están retirados, pero siguen peleando y para nosotros es un orgullo que están haciendo todo este trabajo. Let me share my screen really quick. And so I just, can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, I want to thank Commissioner Juan Marines from Ingham County for inviting me to be here. Thank you, Juan, and thank you for all the work, the many years that you've done. Guillermo, the countless hours, everything you do here in Lansing. Diana Rivera. I mean, the list goes on and on. Like we're so proud of the work that you guys do and supporting you. And so again, thank you for the opportunity. And I'm gonna jump right into it. So DACA, for those of you that are online and don't understand DACA is something that came about in the Obama administration. And unfortunately, it was a good thing at that point because young people didn't have a pathway to have anything. They were raised here. They ended up here in the U.S. Sometimes, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, and they don't know anything else but that they grew up here and this is their home. But there was no pathway. So, they started the Dreamers, right? The Dreamers started, and it's a very courageous group. Often we talk about movements and moments, right? Some people just start a moment and then they don't follow through, but they've created a movement that has over 20 years, young, brave Latinx leaders that use their voice to speak power, the truth, and all the way to the president, right? And the Supreme Court. I mean, we just had a ruling of the Supreme Court where the Trump administration is trying to dismantle. Luckily, we were able to win that. And it's a short term, it's a Band-Aid approach. It's not a permanent solution, right? So from what Oscar is talking about is something that's very related to DACA because it affects their family, their well-being, their mental health. And during this pandemic, if a parent gets picked up, they have to pick up, right, where the things. So DACA, what it is just, it's a protection from deportation. It's an opportunity to get a driver license to work legally with a work permit. And, it's loosely defined, but man, the way they enforce it, if you get a driving ticket or something, you run the risk of being deported. And when the Obama administration created this, they, it was under a lot of pressure, right? The Dreamers were fighting for this. And at the time, the Republicans did not want that. So he developed an executive order to create this DACA. Again, it's not a permanent fix, and it bothers me because I was born in Mexico myself, and I was lucky that my father is a bracero, right, that worked in this country while the American soldiers were fighting abroad. They gave my father a pathway to obtain citizenship. And that's why I'm here, right? I benefited from that. I was able to get my doctorate degree to sit at the table, right? We talk about how if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. They're gonna chop you up and they're gonna do whatever they want to you. So we have an obligation to be at the table and to fight. These DACA students aren't asking for handouts. They are hardworking. And I put some things that here, the life of a DACA student. You know, in order to maintain this DACA status, they have to do so much. They're under so much pressure. They're always having to pay attention to the news, to what this president is doing, almost constantly attacking and other people attacking this status of DACA. And so it bothers me a lot. And I'm glad, you know, that LEAD is talking about this, because that's the only way we're going to bring it up. It's presidential election, Senate. And so we have to hold our leaders accountable. And, you know, I come from the community college. I was there for 8 years at Lansing Community College. I saw so many DACA students come in and trying to drag, right, just to drag their degree. They would finish in 2 years and 1 year, and then having to go to like 200 credits, paying out of pocket. It's ridiculous. And again, it's still going on. And, you know, we have so much talent. We have students going to Harvard, to Stanford, to Princeton. We hear the stories, and yet we still are in a standstill. So I just want to lift that up. And just, again, I mean, it is very difficult. The commission this year, we're giving $35,000 in scholarships to students. And, you know, it's not just specifically for DACA, but it's for all the Latinx students in the state of Michigan. And yet, you know, reading the stories of the students are so heart-wrenching, because Latinos during this pandemic are the ones struggling the most to stay, retention, to retain and graduate, because of all the things that they have to go through. It's not just the pandemic, but it's the stress, right? That the migra is gonna come, ICE is gonna show up at their home. And again, when this was rolled out, they gave their information, right? So they know where their parents live. They know all this information. So ICE anytime could just come and pick all of them up if they wanted to. And that is very disturbing. And so I just, you know I don't have that much time, but I just wanted to lift that. And then I'll just end with this, with Guillermo. When you introduced me, you introduced everything that I do and have done. And I want to thank you for that. But I want to thank my ancestors, right? They colonized us, they beat us, they raped us, they beat us, and everything, all of us in this call. And yet we're still here, right? It's because of them, because of the struggles. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. When they were picking cotton and busting, you know, their behinds, they were thinking of us sitting in this conference. And I just want to thank everybody for this opportunity. And again, let's lift these DACA students and help them however we can.
Thank you, Dr. Sustaita and Dr. Castañeda. Are there any questions for our presenters? I know the information is there, but if you have any questions, I can put it on the chat and we will take it. So, Oscar, is there any action going on, doing any kind of action at this detention center you mentioned, the GSA, or ¿cómo se llama? You're muted.
What about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, there are many very important things, but I want to mention one in particular that is being painful right now. So we know a lot of things that are happening inside of the technically it's called the North Lake Prison, but we need solid information. We have been trying to FOIA the contract in between Geo Group and the Board of Prisons. No success. Now, to be honest, we don't know what we're doing. We're trying. We're in our team. Nobody has experience in doing FOIA requests. We are desperate trying to find a lawyer who knows about FOIA, how to work FOIA cases, and sue the Board of Prisons to get the contracts. There are so many details in there. For instance, we were told that it has to be a psychiatric evaluation of each inmate in order to collect the monthly amount for each inmate. We are told that they have no counselor in the premises, and they get the one monthly counseling session in English via Zoom. And this is before COVID. So we wanna get the contract so we know what is happening and what requirements are there. This is one big piece. Okay. And the other big piece is, I go to many forums and I talk about this place, and people doesn't know about it. So spread the voice, let people know what's going on. This is big, and I haven't found one person, even people who has politically different ideas, who will say that makes sense, because it doesn't. So two things in there. Find us somebody to FOIA and spread the word.
Gracias, Oscar, and gracias, Dr. Sustaita. I appreciate your presentations. Our time is kind of coming to an end, but we're gonna move on to our next presentation, which is a session 4, LEAD Crisis Response System, how to report bias and hate crimes. And our presenter for this segment is Ms. Diana Rivera, who is Librarian Emeritus at Michigan State University Libraries. She is a member of the Lansing LEAD chapter and is on the LEAD State Board, chairing the Crisis Response System Committee. Rivera is an alumna of the Smithsonian Institution, Latino Museum Studies Fellows Program, and the National Association for Latino Arts and Culture Fellows Program. Diana, you're on.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Guillermo. Hang on. I was trying to practice this the entire time everyone was speaking, and yet I couldn't. Okay. So what I'm going to do is share this one. Okay. Okay. Kids, practice at home before you get on a session. Maybe it's because I'm just nervous because we have a lot of attorneys on, but let me see. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so there's a committee within the state board LEAD. There's 4 of us that I am one of those 4 committee members of the crisis response team. And we are charged with the responsibility to follow up on incident report forms that are submitted through the LEAD website. We, over the past 3 years, have worked on actions against the Latino student, Latino workers, and other community members. When we came up with working on our manual, we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive of everyone within our communities. That's why when you do finally get to read and use the manual, you will be seeing a combination of Latino, Latino, Latinx in reference to the community being mentioned. So in 2017, there was a statewide collaboration among Latino leaders to address hate and bias incidents. We saw an upsurge, an uptick of that And that's where the work for the crisis response manual came in to systematically address the issues that we started seeing. So like I mentioned before, incidents that we have worked with are incidents against students, people working in either offices or on the construction field or in agriculture. And the incidents range from intimidation to wage discrimination to sexual and other physical assaults. And it didn't really matter, you know, you try and pinpoint some of these crimes to a certain age group, it didn't. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about the purpose of the committee, get into hate crime and bias incidents, how you can help those who are attending, how you can help move one of the key goals of LEAD forward. And that is by considering the start of a chapter. We know that LLEAD in Detroit will be working on starting a chapter there. And then finally, a link to the manual where you will have an opportunity to look at it a little bit deeper or look at it in depth a little bit more. But the 4 charges that we have start with being a response network to any incident form that is included or that is submitted. And the response we're looking at, I'm going to be talking about this generally because there's chapters in our communities right now that will also take these incident reports after we forward them. And we expect a uniform method of addressing these. So we establish a small group to receive information and monitor for anti-Latino hate, crime, or bias incidents in the local areas. That's where we're hoping that a lot of this work happens. For places that don't have chapters, it's the LEAD state committee that handles that. But we really need help and interest in doing this for your own communities. So part of the response also is to come together to develop a cohesive response when an incident arises. What are the steps that one takes to make sure that it's being fully addressed and that there isn't a step that's skipped? We look to work collaboratively with victims and the victims' identity groups. You know, for you know, Afro-Latino, we could go either with Latino groups or the African-American groups or both. Looking at their communities, working with partner law enforcement, and of course, the media. The second one is victim support. We want to identify the needs and provide necessary support to victims and their family. What is it that they need? Is it psychological assistance? Is it medical assistance? Is it resources that might, and that are in their community that might help house them in a different location? What are the community resources that that we can offer because they exist already? We notify the victim's organized identity group. For example, those in the LGBTQ community, Latino organizations, faith-based community groups, churches, organizations. And we help victims find those resources to help with those medical issues, with the counseling needs, whether out in the community or within the school, like what programs are available that are already set up that they can reach and tap in quickly. The financial needs, what monetary resources are needed, housing, do they have to move from a community because of harassment? Those are the types of resources that sometimes we really fall short when we just think that resources is just money. And then of course, documentation and reporting. On page 13 of the crisis response manual, we have a form that we encourage everyone who contacts us for the purpose of documenting their situation, reporting what occurred, when it occurred, how it occurred, and by who. Next, we collect and share information about the incident, either back to the chapter or the chapter to us. We hope that our network, like I said, increases with some of you out here in the community to consider starting a chapter there. I know that right now we have people registered from Kalamazoo, from the Thumb. We have people from Detroit, from Southeastern Michigan. You know, it would really be a great assistance to us all statewide to get to that point where someone doesn't have to travel or rely only on calls to get the support. So education and public awareness is part of what we're doing today. And that's sharing the data and the educational information on how victim support, diverse groups, immigration, hate activity, and prevention may occur. Is it something that we can do with programming? Is it something that we can do with leaflets or publications or musical videos? We encourage and facilitate the community dialogue and educational activities that would support those. We want to communicate any of our demands and ideas with local leaders, city officials, state legislatures, and others to have our voices heard. Someone had said that our voices aren't heard, and they're right. And unless we move forward, and I believe that LEAD has done a really good job in getting some of these voices heard and changes made. The difference between a hate crime and bias incidents. This is a slide that I'll be sharing on the LEAD website, but this is just a compilation of stuff that's in the manual already. Sometimes we've gotten contacted about a bias incident instead of a hate crime. Others have wondered if maybe it's just a bias incident, but it really does turn out to be a hate crime. And I think it's important for people to be aware of the difference. Here, this, whoops. Okay, well, the last thing that I was showing was the link to get to the manual. And there is a form there that people can fill out, submit. It'll come to us. We check it pretty much daily, sometimes every other day. Right now, the reporting forms have been down, and I believe that a lot of it has to do with COVID and the fact that we're all pretty much secluded. I expect that people are going to get tired of being secluded. We're going to start seeing more of an uptick, especially as the election gets closer. I will
1 minute.
I will answer any questions for this. I'm putting in my email, and we'll also try and get to you as soon as possible with that. So following next is Al Flores.
Thank you, Diana. Appreciate your presentation. And again, encourage those that are online to consider working on a chapter in their communities. Again, thank you for allowing me to be here as a moderator for these sessions. It's been great seeing new and old faces. The one that is not so old or not so new, Librado, good to see you, man. It's been a long time. And of course, all of you that have joined. Librado and I worked way back together somehow, but good seeing you. So now I'm gonna bring back Mr. Alberto Flores, who is going to say our last thank yous, comments, and invite us to the next presentation of this conference. Mr.
Yes,
Flores?
and this is going to be very short. Thanks again, everyone, particularly LEAD members, sponsors, presenters, excellent presentations today. And please, at 6 o'clock, join Congressman Castro for his keynote. You have to go on LEAD Michigan YouTube channel. Okay, LEAD Michigan YouTube channel. It is on the flyer invite that we sent everybody. Again, thanks a lot for joining us. And Danny, can you play the video again that was in the beginning that we couldn't hear? Mr. Danny?
Yep, give me 1 second.
Our world is in chaos with turmoil happening daily.
This truly is a moment of reckoning for our nation.
Coronavirus, lockdown, racial disparities, racial injustice, wear a mask. Protests, uprising, riots, boycotts.
Muestra el camino. We are demonstrating and advocating.
Our democracy is under attack. Our First Amendment rights are freedom of the press.
America, we can do better. America, we must do better.
It is imperative to turn your concern,
Your anxiety and disbelief.
to the polls.
Everyone that is eligible to vote must vote.
In November and in local elections in August.
We're at this moment in time.
Para vivir un día a la vez. Ayer ya pasó mi Cristo y mañana quizás no vendrá. Ayúdame hoy, yo quiero vivir un día a la vez. Tú ya viviste entre los hombres.
In a historic time, our nation cries out. Our families cry out.
Make sure that your abuelos, your tíos, and your tías,
Your madrinas, your padrinos, your primos.
Sus hijos, sus hijas, mijas, mijos.
All who are 18 and older.
Make sure this year you use your vote.
Yo quiero vivir un día a la vez. Un día a la vez.
necesitamos su voto.
In this election, we really need your vote.
Todos que pueden votar, tienen que votar.
Mi gente, your vote is your voice.
Ayer ya pasó mi Cristo y mañana quizás no vendrá. Ayúdame hoy, yo quiero vivir un día a la vez.
Our nation cries out for you.
Very nice.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.